Good evening, everyone, distinguished audience. Mr. Frank Lowy, the chairman of the board of the INSS, and Major General Amos Yadlin, my dear friend, president of the INSS. I would like to thank the institute. The INSS is definitely the most influential institute today on the discourse pertaining to Israel's strategic issues, and of course, this conference speaks for itself. So the best of luck and congratulations to all the people who are involved in the institute and its donors. Well, today another line has been crossed in the Israeli political system, and I'm saying this as a member of the cabinet for many years. And publishing the minutes of the meetings of the cabinet is a fatal stroke to Israel's official capability, and we, the people, will pay the dearest price. And mainly what pains me is the families of the fatalities and the injured soldiers who lose trust in the discretion and judgment of the war room of the government. Every day that passes, we see and witness more scandals and more injustices, and there is one line that connects between all of these events, whether it's the discoveries on Protective Edge and the chief commissioner's police commissioner's announcement about investigators being intimidated. And the main theme here is irresponsibility, because Israel is undergoing a tremendous turmoil that has to do with its moral values, and these have been concealed at times with cigars and baths of champagne. But ultimately, there are some profound questions regarding ethics and moral values, and because these are the basis of a strong democratic country. People say that you don't oust the prime minister for cigars and a champagne, but also not for suffocating mortgages and the rent and the salary, the monthly salary that's all used up after 1 week. So what do we oust the prime minister for? We are raising a generation that asks itself, what do you oust a prime minister for? And I asked the Minister of Education, who was here this morning, and the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Defense, and the Minister of Homeland Security, who sees it all and keeps silent. And ultimately, leadership is also tested based on what you say and do in crucial moments. And they know that corruption is eating us up from the inside. They know that they need to take action, yet they do nothing. I have always said that I'm willing to set everything aside, forgo my own personal aspirations, just as long as we stop this. And I call upon Kahlon, Ardan, and Bennett from this podium, stop this dangerous journey and take a stand, take action before it is too late. In the Middle East as well, there is a lot of unrest and complete disorder that is expressed first and foremost in the disaster we've been witnessing in the past few years in Syria, and of course with everything that surrounds the entire Middle East, from ISIS to Iran. And now there's a new president in the U.S. at the White House, Donald Trump. And in this crucial historic junction, it's high time we stop lying to ourselves, and we need to say very clear statements of truth that can be separated from the lies of the extreme left and extreme right. And I'd like to state the following statements that are truth. The endeavor, the settlement project, has reached a scale that is now risking the continued existence of the State of Israel as a Jewish state to continue to widely build in the settlements throughout the territory all the time, will replace the Jewish majority in Israel with an Arab majority. And the voices of annexation that we heard just today earlier, including the call for annexing Area C that was uttered by Minister Naftali Bennett and others, this is the most tangible expression of this risk. The big settlement blocks are definitely a part of the solution. Decisions and overarching declarations regarding massive construction in Judea and Samaria, that's part of the problem. Number two, the ongoing domination of another nation. It has reached a dangerous position that is currently threatening the moral nature of the State of Israel as a democratic country. Number three, the attempt to reach a permanent status agreement in one full swoop, in one process, in one summit, with the parameters and equations for a permanent status agreement. It has failed time and again, and this is something that has happened to all prime ministers in the last generation. It happened to Barak and to Olmert, and even to Netanyahu in the recent round that Martin Indyk was involved in. It ended in great dismay time and again, and sometimes also with growing violence. And therefore, in view of these truths, we must think, we must get a grip. We cannot come to terms and accept a status quo, and we mustn't repeat the mistakes time and again. We mustn't risk the security, and we mustn't go for national suicide with our eyes wide open. And even Washington, that's now starting anew, and also in Jerusalem, we need to think about an up-to-date roadmap, a new roadmap that makes more sense, that would integrate us and would take us closer in a significant measured steps towards a two-state solution through a gradual process and not something that would happen in one full swoop. And you have the basis, the infrastructure for that. First of all, there's the regional infrastructure, and it's always mentioned in every INSS conference regarding the shared interests we have with our immediate neighbors and the more distant ones facing ISIS, facing Iran, thanks to their desire to stop Iran and to proceed with the Palestinians, and thanks to principles from the Arab Peace Initiative that's definitely alive and kicking. This foundation must be combined with the aspiration to separate from the Palestinians, the same perception that I presented in this conference last year. So these two foundations, the regional infrastructure and the vision of the separation, and taking measures that are outside the box or are new, or certain components that were mentioned in the past and then rejected, and I'll list them later on. All these can create a new roadmap, a new energy for the realization of the two-state solution, and I hope that the new American administration will follow that path. Now, I know that there will be people in the audience or in the Israel or amongst Israelis in general who will say, "Oh, forget about it. That's just the left-wing rhetoric. That's it. The two-state vision has died. No point in talking about it. It's in the past. It's behind us." It's still the same rhetoric and the same fixation of the Zionist left. And since we are often attacked as a Zionist left, allow me to say a few words about this Zionist left wing, because we are a responsible Zionist left wing that knows where to build in Israel, where to determine the borders of the state, and beyond what was designated for us on November 29th, and we are a patriotic left that refuses to go back to the 67 lines that liberated and united Jerusalem, that wishes to strengthen the big major settlement blocks, but not beyond them, because we want, as a left wing that loves the Jews and loves the state of Israel, we want to protect it as much as we can and to guarantee a Jewish majority over the generations in the state of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. And therefore, we strive for a peace that is based on the iron steel foundations of security, a peace that is inevitable, and it is the strategic goal of the state of Israel. And we outright reject this false assumption that all of the past attempts teach us that that peace is unachievable. What did Nelson Mandela say? Things always seem impossible until they are done. The return to Zion was an example for that. The establishment of the state of Israel so was making the desert bloom, and also peace can be such an example, because if we try time and again, and ultimately we will achieve it. On the other hand, the right wing in Israel is ecstatic with excitement. Finally, they think they have an opportunity to annex, and to annex big time. And here it begins with all its might to create this feeling that all of it is behind us, and now we're moving towards full, partial or full annexation to completely finish off the idea of a two-state vision, as Bennett stated, and other senior members of the Likud who talk about it out in the open in different ways. They want to kill off any option of separating peacefully. They hope that in view of the statements that were heard during the election campaigns in the U.S., the new U.S. administration will give a green light for Jewish settlement throughout Judea and Samaria and the annexation of these areas to the state of Israel. Well, I wish to make it clear here because me and my colleagues and peers will object with all our forces democratically as well to any such attempt that will lead to a final eradication of the Zionist vision. It will kill off the state of Israel as a Jewish democratic state. It will perpetuate bloodshed in the region, will lead to the collapse of the basis of the shared values we have with the U.S. And, talking about the U.S., I don't think that a person who wants to build a wall between the U.S. and Mexico will support the breaking down of the wall between us and the Palestinians. We will not go back to the 67 lines, and we will not annex Judea and Samaria. We will not commit suicide, not in either of these ways. Both scenarios are in stark contrast to the shared values and interests of both countries. Only a two-state solution, two states living peacefully, one beside another for peace and security and economic success. This is the only solution. And once again, I'd like to reiterate that the settlement bloc's perception will lead to the victory of Zionism. We will reject any kind of pressure or international solution that will be coerced upon us. We'll reach democratic decisions of the state of Israel. The people who have the responsibility have the authority. And of course, I do not deny the emotional Jewish profound connection to Judea and Samaria. And certainly, we all recognize the connection that is unparalleled between us, between the Jewish people, the Israeli people, between us and Jerusalem. Yet, I'd like to bring up what David Ben-Gurion said, who said with tremendous pain in April 1949 in the Knesset, he said the IDF could have conquered the entire area between the Jordan River and the sea. But what kind of a country would we have had then? Assuming that there are elections, we would have had a Knesset with an Arab majority. And when the question of the integrity of the land without a Jewish state or a Jewish state without the integrity of the land, he said, Ben-Gurion determined, we chose a Jewish state without the integrity of the land. And I wish to advocate his position and Ben-Gurion's position. And I understand that this means relinquishing part of our right of return to our homeland. And we won't, just as we won't accept any claim of the other people to return to our homeland. In November 29th, the nations voted in favor of establishing two countries, a Jewish one and an Arab one. And we mustn't move towards a decision that is in the opposite direction, one country that will be both Jewish and Arab. Ladies and gentlemen, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is bitter. It is hard. It has seen many victims. It's been going on for over a century. And it has so many complicated implications. We've talked about it so much since 1967 in the past 50 years. But I do believe that based on the two foundations I had mentioned, the regional opportunity on the one hand and the separation on the other, we need to try again. But this time we can try and do things differently to add additional components, some of them well known that haven't been tried, others were tried and failed, and others maybe are not so well known. I think that first of all, we need to act to make sure that the reconciliation will be created between the two nations. The entire process between the two people have stopped. For over a decade, there's nothing going on. There is no people-to-people process, and we must exert maximal effort to obtain a massive pragmatic majority. I believe such a majority exists on both sides. It just is very silent. We allow the extremists to speak, but the Palestinians need to see hope and a true direction for change, and they will see an option of a true realization of the rights, even if it won't be done fully. And then I hope that the vast majority will agree to take the required risks for a profound compromise with the State of Israel. And in the same extent, Israeli citizens who will see and feel that there's a sense of security, that the threats are disappearing, especially the terrorism and the incitement and hatred, will agree in a vast majority that exists to reach a historic compromise that will guarantee the continued existence of the Jewish people in our Jewish democratic state, even without realizing all of our national yearnings. So, along with various interim measures that we need to move towards them as trust building and reality changing measures, there's also a need, in addition to that, to work on the profound psychological element between the two nations, and only then to reach negotiations over the final permanent status agreement. And therefore, I suggest a new set of tools that can serve as the basis for an up-to-date roadmap. And these are, first of all, to ratify once again the commitment of the parties to the two-state vision, also based on the regional initiative and also based on international recognition. Number two, I think that we need to allocate a period of 10 years in which the entire territory west of the Jordan will be determined as an area without any kind of violence. Both sides will agree on a strong and significant shared enforcement and punishment that is uncompromising, and this process will be accompanied by international backing. And during that period, the sides will move towards the realization of the two-state solution in the following way. Israel will move towards separation through completing of the building of the fence to complete the buffer between Jerusalem itself and the surrounding Palestinian villages, and yes, by transferring additional authorities and powers to the Palestinian Authority and to the Palestinians, including in the sea area. Yes, sir, Mr. Naftali Bennett, including areas in sea, especially the areas that are adjacent to the fence to the Palestinian cities, in order to enable urban, civilian, economic development, because I'm talking about civilian authorities in the sea area. Israel will freeze any construction outside the blocks and will avoid any activities that could be irreversible and prevent the two-state solution. And also, concurrently, Palestinian economic development will be accelerated through regional and international measures of all types, definitely in the Palestinian cities. And the Palestinians, in turn, they will do everything they can in full force in order to prevent terrorism and incitement, and will work towards establishing inner Palestinian consensus that will include both Judea and Samaria and Gaza. If they reach such consensus and agreement and will decide to declare a Palestinian state in temporary borders, then Israel will positively consider recognizing such a state and to consider it as a partner for the final part of the permanent status agreement, in which the permanent borders of the Palestinian state will be determined. The IDF will anyhow continue to operate throughout the area until the Jordan River, and of course around the Gaza Strip, in the security collaboration with the Palestinian Authority and its apparatuses will be strengthened and enhanced. And at the same time, all parties will work on the Gaza issue with originality. I liked Israel Katz's ideas. I'm not certain that they're applicable and feasible, but let me say it's high time we move beyond the construction of a deep water port in Gaza that will enable the entrance of goods under security scrutiny. And I think we need to move on to demilitarization and destruction of the tunnels as part of the entire vision that will set us towards the horizon that goes beyond realizing the two-state solution. And after 10 years will have passed, assuming that there was a peaceful, very quiet period with development, then both parties can sit to direct negotiations with regional and international support on all the core issues and the permanent status agreement issues and the end to the conflict. I know that some people think that this can be achieved already today. I think that reality today doesn't enable that, so there is a need to take one step back and to establish some kind of a strengthening, comprehensive, containing measure in order to reach the final measure of completing the agreement agreement between us and the Palestinians for full peace, and to ensure that concurrently, and I'm bringing up another idea now, to make sure that there are regional infrastructures that will be based concurrently, because we can see what's going on in the region and it cares about the region, and Israel can establish special and original frameworks that will provide some support for all of these, and I would suggest that the core of these institutions will be in Jerusalem. So in conclusion, now that there's a new administration in the White House, and there's a true risk that the nation state of the Jewish people will lose it in an accelerated process or out of some kind of decision through annexation, we must ignite a renewed process that would completely change the direction towards the realization of a two-state solution to prevent the disaster of annexation. This is why I have suggested and am suggesting an up-to-date revised process in which every party will receive its share. The Palestinians will receive additional recognition, more authorities, more territory in the horizon, and while the Israelis will receive security and regional integration and peace and quiet, there won't be this unbridled race towards the unknown and an impossible deadline, and the direction will change and become more optimistic, and the conditioning of a peaceful period will show us that ultimately we can create a reality that stops violence and terrorism, and most importantly, we will stop the spillover towards annexation. Hell in the shape of Bosnia and Syria will maintain the paradigm of two-state solution. The process between the two nations will become more real, and the separation will advance, the economy will advance, and the regional infrastructure will become more realistic in the spirit of the Arab Peace Initiative. In this way, we'll save the settlement blocks, and the Israeli border will be around the blocks, and this will be the true victory of Zionism. Seek peace and chase it. That is what is written in our scriptures, and I hope that we'll continue to persist to seek peace, us and our neighbors, with courage in order to reach the goal, the destination that will ultimately promise the next generation some peace and quiet. Thank you very much.